Hello, everyone. It's ironic that I am recording this presentation from a beautiful British Columbia, Vancouver, British Columbia, just to the north of the northern border of the Northwest chapter, who's hosting the NAHMMA virtual conference. So it's a beautiful area, and I'm happy to be here, being able to present this. So I'm going to talk about UWED and CEW here in California and give a little more information on that. But first, before I do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about our organization, CPSC, or California Product Stewardship Council. We're a scrappy organization of 5 employees that do a lot of advocacy work for product stewardship and extended producer responsibility. We're managed by, or we're overseen by a board of 14. Most of them are local government representatives, but there is also some private sector representatives on our board. All these folks are very talented and bring a lot of great experience and ideas and diversity to our board. And so we really appreciate all the work they put in for, as board members here at CPSC. I have to also thank our funders, because without them we couldn't do what we do. So we have quite a bit of our funding comes from our cities, counties, districts, and JPAs. So thank you very much for continuing to support CPSC. And then we also have a bit of private sector funding that comes in as well to help us do what we do. And so you can see all the folks that are contributing here from the private sector and the various levels that they contribute at. So what is CEW and UWED? So CED is covered electronic device. So this is a device that is defined or determined by DTSC, or the California Department of Toxic Substance Control, to be a hazardous waste. And so right now the CEDs that are defined by the DTSC are monitors. Now this can be CRTs, or it can be LEDs, or CEDs, either those types that are flat panels measuring 4 inches or greater in diagonal size. So what is CEW? So CEW is covered electronic waste. This is the program that is run basically to fund the recycling of the CRTs and the flat panels. So this is fees that are collected at the check stand, at the point of sale, or online for those monitors that qualify for the CEW fee. And then we have Universal Waste Electronic Devices, or UWED. So these are other devices that have a circuit board and a cord and pose a threat to the environment due to potential for hazardous waste to be contained within them. And so those are also regulated under DTSC's authority, but they don't have any funding. So that's a problem. And then finally, there's other products out there that don't fit into the other 2 categories of CEW or UWED. Those are REAM. And so that's recyclable electronic equipment materials, a phrase I came up with many years ago. And this is going to cover things like old power tools. It's going to be small household appliances. It's going to be your power tools with batteries, those types of devices that don't have anywhere else that they fit in a category at this point. So let's talk about the California E-Waste program. So it was established back in 2003. This was in response to DTSC deeming the CRTs as hazardous waste and no longer allowed to be landfilled in California landfills. And so cities and counties across the state were left scrambling, trying to figure out how to pay for a program that was unfunded and a ban that was a ban without a plan. Basically, they were banned from disposal, but there was no plan to how to deal with them. So fortunately, the state stepped up. The state legislature stepped up and approved SB 20, or Senate Bill 20, by Senator Byron Scheer back in 2003. This was amended a year later by SB 50. By the same author to just make some tweaks to the program. But basically what it did is establish the fee that's charged at the point of sale for every single flat panel, or laptop, anything with a screen 4 inches or larger. And so the way the legislation was structured was that for screens that are 4 inches to 15 inches, 4 inches to 15 inches, currently they're charged at $4. You can see the fee has changed over the years depending on the cost of recycling. For screens that are 15 inches to 35 inches, that's $5 a piece currently, and then anything over 35 inches is $6. So while there are fees for monitors out there and for laptops because they have monitors, also think about your iPads and your tablets. Those are also charged a fee, but there's no fee charged for non-monitor type e-waste. And so that's left as orphan waste that doesn't have a funding program behind it. There are collection programs out there, whether they be individual collection events or folks that are collecting these materials on a regular basis. But either way, there's likely going to be a small cost associated with collecting the materials that don't have a fee like the monitors. So some of those products you may not pay a fee, but most you will. Okay, so you heard me talk about CRTs and flat panels and laptops, but what about all these other materials, all these things you see on the screen here that I've got circled in red? What about, desktop PCs? What about printers, printers, fax machines, copiers, microwaves, other small household appliances? What about vacuums? So the desktop PCs and also the gaming stations tend to actually have enough money to fund their recycling, cover their cost of recycling, but these other materials don't. And so we really need to do something different to make sure that those are funded. CalRecycle back in 2018, and actually earlier than that in 2017, started to look at this and how they could expand the program as they were getting pressured to do so, to add more products. So they created the feature of electronic waste management in California. This report is available online at CalRecycles website, and this talked about what can be done. And I've summarized the report and took out the 9 recommendations that came out of this process. And those 9 recommendations are shown on the screen here within. I'm not going to cover each one of them individually, but I'm going to point out a couple of them that I think are important. Certainly you'll be able to take a look at these either in the report or on the screen here, and also in the presentation, copy of the presentation that you will receive for attending the conference. So one of the ones I wanted to point out is that CalRecycle definitely was promoting durability, repair, waste reduction, and recyclability, because those are important, because basically we want these products to last longer. If they break, we need to be able to repair them. They shouldn't be completely dead or useless because of the small repair needed. That's a design for obsolescence. The products should be designed to create the least amount of waste possible when they're being made. And then also when they're dead and they're no longer useful to us, they need to be very easily recyclable, so that the cost of recycling is not egregious. The other one I wanted to point out was number 9 on this list, which is to change the CEW fee collection from the retail level to the brand owner or manufacturer level. This is significant. This is taking it away from more of a product stewardship, visible fee, charge of the check stand, and actually charging the manufacturers. Because if you think about how many retail outlets sell these screens, these products that are covered under the CEW program, how many are sold online and the fee is charged there? And to collect that money, how much does it take? How much effort does it take to collect all that money and get it to CalRecycle so that they can use it to fund the program? Versus, what if you just chased after the manufacturers? It's a much smaller population to try and get the money, much easier to collect the money, and still they may roll the cost of what they're being charged into their product. They're going to pay for it. The consumers will probably pay for it one way or the other, whether they pay for it as a visible fee or an internalized cost. But it gives the manufacturer the opportunity to not necessarily pass that fee along, that cost, because maybe they design their product better and greener, and so they get a lesser amount that they're charged by the stewardship organization in order to handle it. So there's a lot of good things about making it an internalized cost. So I want to look a little more at the states as a whole. So we only have 25 states that even have e-waste laws in California, including plus the District of Columbia. But of those 25 states, only California has a visible fee. all the other states. And you see the list there, and you can see that there was kind of a run on laws in 2008 and 2009 to get these programs established. But again, only California has a visible fee. Everyone else is true EPR. Now, what about all these other products? What about the cordless drills? What about the corded drills? What about other old power tools? What about lawnmowers that have detachable batteries? What about the lawnmowers that don't, because they have embedded batteries and they have a cord that plugs into the wall to charge it back up? What about those big plastic toys with the motors and the batteries in them, the lithium batteries in them for the plastic cars that the kids drive? What about those? What's happening with those? That's an awful lot of waste, and if it's not funded, it likely will go to landfill. And then, of course, we have large appliances, large household appliances, and then we have the small household appliances. So a lot of different products that need some help. So how can we improve this system? Well, like I mentioned earlier, only CRTs and flat panels are covered under the program for funding. We really need to add those other computer peripherals, all those, the printers, fax machines, all those things that we use on a regular basis to make sure that there's funding behind them so they get recycled. And what about the small household appliances and power tools? Those would be the ream. What about vacuums? They've got a lot of materials to them, and there's some good value in the motors and et cetera, but if there's no funding, they're not going to get recycled. What about things that aren't e-waste, wouldn't be considered e-waste? What about the large appliances? Can we roll those in somehow, or can we start a program for those? And there's definitely a whole bunch of other products that would fall into these categories or fall into their similar categories that I haven't listed here, so just too many to list. So what do we want to do if we're going to either start a new program or expand an existing program? Is it going to be a true EPR program where it's going to be the manufacturers who are actually funding and running the program? Is it going to be a product stewardship program, kind of like what California has now, where somebody's running the program, somebody's collecting the money, but the money's coming from the consumers, coming through that visible fee charged at the point of sale, either online or at brick and mortar? If you're going to do EPR, you're going to need to likely internalize the costs. It makes the most sense, and so that the manufacturer makes better decisions. If you're going to do product stewardship, it's likely going to be more visible fees, and those who's going to collect those, et cetera. Lots of details to think about. Details when you're looking at these and which one you want to use for which product category. Maybe you're going to do a menu of them because one product category may be good for EPR while the other one may be better for product stewardship, and it just depends on the circumstances of the type of product and how it's distributed, how it's manufactured, et cetera. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between EPR and product stewardship, and CPSC has created the stewardship spectrum. This kind of gives a graphic representation of how these two are very different. So on the far left, you have extended producer responsibility. So that is the producers mostly, if not all, completely funding the program and running the program. There's going to be some involvement with the retailers and local government, but the majority of the responsibility is placed on the producers to fund and run the program. Then on the far right, you look at the other side of the spectrum. You have where we're in product stewardship. This is mostly borne by the retailers. It's got the facilities are the ones doing the processing. Local government and consumers have a significant role here, especially the consumers, since they're paying fees, visible fees, to fund the program. There's going to be little to no industry funding here under product stewardship. So again, there's no driver to make them want to change their ways. So in California, we have 12 EPR product stewardship programs, 6 of each. And so on the far left, you see thermostats, ag, pesticide containers, and pharmaceuticals and sharps. That is true EPR. The manufacturers are funding and running those programs, and with little to no consumer involvement except for to get the materials back. Okay, on the far right, almost on the far right, I'm going to talk about propane cylinders in a second. You have tires and e-waste. So tires and e-waste, those two programs are run by a state of California. They're both visible fees. So there is no contribution by the industry, the manufacturers at all on those programs. And so that's why they're product stewardship, because again, if the industry is paying for the program, it's more on the extended producer responsibility or EPR side. And then we have a whole host of programs that are in the middle there somewhere, and it depends on how much funding is coming from the producers versus who's running the program. And so that's kind of why those fall into those different areas of the stewardship spectrum. And finally, on the far right is the 1 pound propane cylinders. And the reason I show this on here is because it is a voluntary program. There is not a law stating that they have to do this. There was a ingenious gentleman who was working for a large company who produced the single-use 1 pound propane cylinders. They did not want to change their ways. He left the company, designed and patented his own refillable 1 pound propane cylinder, and that is now being spread out across to California, possibly around the United States. These things can be refilled for up to 10 years, well over 70 times. They just need to be recertified at 10 years, and then they're good to go again. But it's kind of like your barbecue exchange program. So one thing that's nice is we're starting to see exchange locations as well. So it's either refill it or exchange it for a full one. But either way, we're getting reusable 1 pound propane cylinders into the hands of the consumers so that they don't have to feel like they have to buy those single-use propane cylinders. Okay, so who should pay for all this? Again, if it's a visible fee, there's no responsibility on the producers. The consumers are the ones paying for it, and they're paying for it at the point of sale, again, or online. The retailers are the ones actually doing most of the work, collecting the money and transmitting the money to whoever the stewardship organization is, whether it be the state or it be a producer group that was hired by a product stewardship organization that was hired by the producers or a group of the producers. Again, but because there's no money coming from the producers, there's no incentive for them to change their design, to make their products more durable, more recyclable, more repairable, greener in general. Also, sometimes there's just products or product categories that it's going to be hard to determine who's going to pay for it, if it's a manufacturer, or how you attach that. And so sometimes true EPR may not work. And so this is where a visible fee will come into play to make sure there's funding for those products that are just difficult to figure out who would actually fund it. So let's go ahead and have the consumer fund it then. And then anytime you have a visible fee, this is public money. CPSC believes that this should be managed like government money, like government is required to manage our taxes, our rates that we pay for solid waste services and other services. It should be managed by the industry that's being regulated, because what we found is that the industry that is being regulated may not always have the consumer's best interest in heart over their own best interest. And so if it's not their money, they shouldn't be allowed to control it. It should be controlled by an independent board that is representative of the whole stakeholder group. If they're internalized costs, then by all means, the producer should run the program because they're funding it. We believe the producers should be incentivizing retailers or other potential collection locations to participate through some kind of financial incentive to get them to do so. If you feel you have to have a retailer requirement to participate, just be careful, because it can be very political. We truly believe that the stewardship organization should be able to encourage the retail locations or other locations to become collection points. And so there's not a need to put that mandate on the retailers themselves. Finally, if the producers are paying the true costs, they just might make those different decisions that I mentioned earlier. They might make better decisions than they've been making, because now they're actually paying for the end of life of the product they produced. And also, either way, you really need government oversight on both of these types of methods, but even more so under internalized costs, because at least with the visible fees, if you have an independent board managing the stewardship organization and controlling the stewardship organization, it's less likely that you're not going to have transparency and all the things you need to make sure the program is running. But certainly under internalized costs, you want to be able to make sure that you ensure that transparency is there, so you can see what the program is doing. How are they treating the members of they're paying into the stewardship plan or the program to make sure that it's fair, because we have seen that in some cases it's not, that a majority product manufacturer may be paying the exact same cost as a very small manufacturer, and that's just not fair, and it shouldn't happen that way. So what are some final thoughts I have for you? Yes, let's expand this system. We need to do so because we need to get more of these products covered. But we got to figure out, what is that funding going to look like? Are we going to have an expansion of the existing product stewardship program where we have the visible fees? Is there going to be true EPR? Is it a new program, or is it lapping onto an existing program? If you can get it, go for EPR first, because it's much better program, much better for getting green design. You're going to have to establish rates and dates for collection and recycling, or at a minimum, a really good convenience standard. And we're finding that sometimes the convenience standard, collection convenience standard, is much better. Make sure the residents, the consumers have access to collection points within maybe 15 miles. Or there's at least one, maybe 2, 3, or maybe even 5. We've said as many as 5 collection locations minimum per county. And then add on to that, let's make sure that for big counties, that maybe you have additional above that 5, one for every, say, 10,000, maybe 5,000 residents, so that you make sure that we have a lot of convenience throughout the jurisdiction. And like I mentioned earlier, be sure there's appropriate oversight. Make sure that there's an appropriate body, governing body, making sure this program is working properly and making sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. That if there are penalties for that could be enforced for non-compliance, that those are carried out. Also, make sure that you, like I mentioned earlier, you ensure that there's transparency from the stewardship organization, because if you don't have that transparency, you don't know how that program is operating, whether or not, where the deficiencies might be. Are they treating all the members of the stewardship plan fairly? Again, so you need that transparency. So normally I would open it up for questions, but since this is a pre-recorded session, I am going to go to my last slide. Please feel free to email me or give me a call if you have any questions about this. My contact information is showing on the screen in front of you, and I would be happy to take your call or take your email. Maybe email is a little better because I can answer it almost any time of day, and I can give you a pretty detailed response, and then we certainly can follow up with a phone call if you'd like. But anyway, I'm glad you took the time to watch this session, fairly short session, but I think I'm hoping that it's informative for you. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call.